Good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your vampire mama, coming to you live from under a full moon in southeastern Louisiana. Glad you're going to be hanging out with me tonight for a little while, because I got some gruesome goodies lined up for you. But before we get started, let's do a quick recap of last week's show for all the slackers out there. Okay, so we talked about Belle Gunness. She was a twisted Black Widow type murderer. And then we talked about a bunch of crazy cannibal cases and the haunted history behind New Orleans' own St. Louis Cathedral. So if you want to hear more about all that madness, go to Spreaker.com where you can replay all past episodes of the show. Also, I have a public service announcement for all you guys out there tonight. Valentine's Day is coming up like really fast, so don't be one of those assholes that runs to Walgreens at the last minute for a box of chocolates and a card. Show your woman you put some thought into her gift. If you're at a loss for ideas, may I suggest getting her an autographed set of the Adrian Trilogy series? These books actually are based right here in southern Louisiana and are more bloodlusty than Interview with a Vampire or True Blood. So message me on Facebook on one of my fan pages if you're interested. There's special pricing going on right now for the entire series, and there's a few little add-ons too that you may be interested in, like t-shirts or other little goodies. So now that I've done some shameless self-promotion, we'll move on. All right, kiddos, are you ready to get your creepy on? Good. Let's get this party started then. So, the first story I have for you tonight is about a crazy mad case of possession. So it's 1907 at the Marion Hill Missionary School in South Africa. The priest, Father Horner, is sweating bullets after he's heard a hair-raising confession from one of the young female students. She confessed that she had actually made a pact with the devil. So for sure he's freaking the hell out right now. Well, maybe, but at first. Later on, the rattling confession gets forgotten under all the pressures of running this big school with all of these orphans and other young students. So he's forgot about it. So, anyway, the student, 16-year-old Clara Germana Seeley, was said to have been quite ordinary. She was orphaned as an infant, and she had been attending the school since she was 4 years old. So the nuns had a pretty good idea about her personality, which had always been rather withdrawn. So Clara's this average kid in every way, at least up until the time of the confession. So imagine, all of a sudden she starts exhibiting erratic behavior and becoming increasingly crazier with every passing day. I guess the nuns finally started paying attention one afternoon when Claire begins growling like an animal and ripping her clothes off. Yeah, I think she'd have had my attention too at this point. But it didn't stop there, though. Of course it didn't, right? No way I'd tell some lame-ass story like that. So anyway, Claire would be fine one moment, and in the very next minute she's carrying on a conversation with someone or something that nobody else could see. One day after one of these episodes, she went to one of the nuns and said, "Sister, please call Father. I must confess. I must tell everything, but be quick or Satan will kill me. He has me in his power. Nothing blessed is within me. I have thrown away all the medals you gave me." And later she comes out with this: "You have betrayed me. You have promised me days of glory, but now you treat me cruelly." So I don't know what the hell she's talking about, neither did the nuns. But this was just the beginning of that madness. Clara's outbursts became more frequent and aggressive. So I'm thinking that the nuns start doing a little theorizing here, because in the case study, there's a statement that reads, "The sisters have witnessed her, Clara's, skin burning after being sprinkled by holy water." They went further to say that Clara would react violently when exposed to sacred objects, even when they were concealed from her. The accounts of the nuns also stated that Clara had developed clairvoyant powers. She would describe people and places and things concerning events in other people's lives that there was no possible way she could have known otherwise. She had also developed the ability to speak fluently in languages that she had never been exposed to, such as German, French, and Polish. Okay, just got to say something here, folks. I'm not a priest, And I'm definitely not a nun. Hell, I'm not even Catholic. But just taking into consideration the last few sentences, I know this chick was possessed. How many more signs could you possibly need? Well, apparently they needed a few, because the case study goes on to say that the nuns stated that Clara possessed inhuman strength, determined by the fact that several of the sisters had attempted to restrain her and they couldn't. But that's not all, folks. It gets even better. There were several witness accounts where folks had actually seen Clara levitate several feet above the ground, but only while she was in these catatonic states. So how'd they get her to come down? They sprinkled her with holy water, and then she'd seem to snap back to reality and, become herself again, completely unaware that she'd been floating in midair just minutes before. Again, I'm baffled that this kid is in a Catholic mission where there are several priests available, and they have allowed this infestation to get to the point where it's at without having already performed an exorcism. But hey, that's just my opinion. Okay, so wait. It gets even better. Again, in the case study, there are witness accounts that say that Clara would become like a serpent and she would slither around on the ground. Clara actually bit one of the nuns on her arm and left puncture marks similar to that of a snake in her skin. So guess what? They finally decided that Clara had become possessed. I wonder what gave them that idea, right? So anyway, it's early in the morning on September 11th, 1906. Father Horner and another priest have been given permission to perform the rite of exorcism. The ritual actually lasts until noon with no results. A short break was then taken, and then the rite reassumed at about 3 o'clock, then continued on until late that night. Clara was exhibiting bizarre and violent behavior. One minute she'd be growling like some rabid animal, and the next she's threatening the priest in foreign languages in a voice that definitely was not her own. At one point, Clara, or the demon in her, managed to kick the Bible from Father Horner's hand. When he bent down to retrieve it, she grabbed a scarf and began to strangle him. It took both of the priests and a couple of nuns to pull her free from the father. So by now, everybody that's involved in this exorcism is exhausted and it's late. The team would stop for the evening and then begin again early the next morning. So the next morning comes around and the rite is commenced. There are 170 people there to witness this ongoing event. Finally, the demon concedes. It tells the priest that it would signal its exit by act of levitation. Shortly after, as the rite was still going on, Clara's body actually rises over 5 feet from the floor, and everyone there saw it. It seemed like the battle had finally been won. The priest declared Clara clean, and of all the demon's influences, and everything was supposed to be just fine. Well, guess what? Not so much. The case study doesn't end there. In fact, the very next entry states that in January of 1907, Clara had made another pact with the devil. You dumbass. Yep, you guessed it. The kid starts exhibiting signs of possession again. So again, the rite would be performed, and it's another 2-day ordeal, folks. So this time the demon departs. Accounts state that an overpowering foul stench filled the air thereafter. So now the case study ends. But curiously, so does any other records concerning Clara. Nothing can be found to assure us that her battle with evil didn't reoccur or didn't take her to the grave, or if she even lived a normal life thereafter. I guess we'll never know. But how about instead of us sitting around wondering what the hell ever happened to Clara, let's talk about the haunted Allen House in Arizona. So, this fantastic palace of a house was built in 1905 by successful businessman Joe Lee Allen. Allen began with a livery stable, and then he expanded his holdings to the Allen Hotel, a private school, a car dealership, and even a horse-drawn hearse rental service. He was also president of the Commercial Loan and Trust Company. So needless to say, Allen's loaded, right? Anyway, Allen, due to his financial status, was a prominent fixture in the community. He doted on his wife and his 3 daughters. Only the best of everything would do for them. His favorite daughter, Liddell, eventually married the owner of a billiards hall and moved away to Texas. Not long after, she gave birth to her first and only son. Less than 2 years after that, Joe died of an apparent heart attack while he's showing off an automobile to a customer at one of his dealerships. Liddell came home immediately. Marriage had not been kind to Liddell. He was in the early stages of obtaining a serious drinking problem once she actually got home. Not long after she got there, she files for divorce and she took over running the Allen Hotel. In the meanwhile, her son Elliot had done really well in school, and he was now an aspiring writer that seemed to have the whole world at his feet, at least until he hit age 28 when he died of pneumonia. Liddell has his body shipped back home where she was, and he's mourned and he's buried. A few weeks after that, her ex-husband passes away as well. So Liddell is just sinking into this state of depression. And in the wee hours of December 26, 1948, after her mother's annual Christmas party, Liddell fixes a plate of food for herself, goes upstairs to her room, and then downs a lethal dose of mercury cyanide. Though her mom's confused and distraught, she has no idea why Liddell would have committed suicide. She closes off her room and treats it as a memorial, and it stays sealed shut, just the way Liddell left it for 35 years. After Liddell's mother's death, the estate was willed to their grandson. So he sections off the suites and into like little separate apartments to be rented out. All of them except for Liddell's suite, which remained sealed. It wasn't long before the tenants actually start complaining about the sound of sorrowful sobs that came from within the sealed room. As time passed, the complaints grew worse, and now there's the ghost of a woman that walks the halls at all hours. So this goes on until the estate was sold in 1985. The new owners, Billy and Bobby Payton, decided to unseal Liddell's room. Everything was just as it had been on the night of her suicide, right down to the bottle of cyanide that was still sitting in the windowsill. But in 2009, a discovery was made by a new set of owners. Mark and Rebecca Spencer, while doing some remodeling, find this loose footboard or floorboard in Liddell's room. Underneath it, there's a bottle of rum and 81 letters that revealed a love affair between Liddell and a married oil executive that was living in Minneapolis. This man had once been her childhood sweetheart, and upon them having rekindling their love, they were actually planning a way to run away together. So, what goes on in the Allen house? Well, plenty. Though Liddell seems to be the main character in play, she's not the only one. There's reports of typical haunting events such as the sound of footsteps and moans and cold spots and furniture that moves by itself. But these are just the least of the reports. Liddell seems to enjoy the afterlife. She's photographed frequently, both having materialized in mirrors or walking around in the house. There was one instance in particular when this man was taking a picture of his wife, and after the film was developed, another woman was sitting in the photo next to his wife. Obviously, she wasn't there while he was taking the picture. There was this other incident where a young couple thought they'd try to catch Liddell. Check this out, y'all. After having seen a closet door open and close by itself, the couple runs to the closet, opens the door, and stepped inside. A couple of dumbasses. Well, they decided they didn't like it very much in there. It's creepy. No shit, right? So when they tried to open the door to get out, they found that they couldn't. It was like the door was being held closed by someone or something. So as they're struggling with the door, there from inside the closet with them came this sinister giggling. Suddenly the door flies open by itself, and you bet your sweet ass that couple hauled ass out of there. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. So there's a life lesson there, kiddos. If a ghost goes into a closet and closes the door, it's not an invitation. Apparently Liddell needed some alone time, and this young couple just didn't get the hint, right? So, now there's other ghosts that can be encountered at the Allen house. There's usually children seen staring down at guests from like the upper level windows, and sometimes you can see them playing downstairs on the lower level. Liddell herself has frequently been photographed standing in the window of her bedroom as well, so the upper level floors of this house are really, really active. So the current owners, the Spencers, mentioned earlier, have tried to commercialize this house somewhat, even though it's still like their family residence. At one time, one of the lower level rooms was turned into a gift shop. The ghost did not approve. It became like a target for constant paranormal tantrums. The Spencers have opened their home for investigations, and the results are like incredible, y'all. Among the findings were over 40 separate EVPs, tons of video footage and photos of paranormal events, and of course of spectral sightings. So I actually watched a few of these videos, and I gotta say, I'm impressed. There's this one in particular where the video camera catches a shadow as it stands from a chair and walks across the room until it disappears into a dark corner. And then there's the second video where the investigators are baffled by this thin strand of light on the floor that they can't figure out where the hell it's coming from, and it's in a darkened hallway where there's no lights on. So one of the investigators steps out of the hall and into one of these adjoining rooms trying to figure out what's going on, and you can distinctly hear on the video a woman's voice going, "Wrong room." So that was really creepy. You guys should check that out. The house can actually be toured or rented out for events such as weddings or family gatherings, but only by appointment. The Spencers state that they are aware of the spirits that share their home, but they've made peace with their presence and they all live together in harmony. The Spencers attest that Liddell led them to find those letters, and in having read each and every one of them, they were able to experience the pain and sorrow that she felt after having been jilted by her married lover. That Christmas night, Liddell was expecting him to arrive at the estate for her. With every single guest that arrived, her hopes were dashed, and by the end of the night, she was so heartbroken that her only means of finding peace would be to take her own life. So now from a haunted estate to a haunted cemetery. What better place to find a ghost, right, y'all? So this cemetery in particular is in Huntsville, Texas, at the end of Bowden Road, which is also known as Demon's Road by the locals. At the end of it is Martha's Chapel Cemetery. So from what I can see, it's not just a cemetery that's haunted. Thrill seekers are going to have one hell of a ride just getting there. Let me tell you what I found. So for decades, and even up till today, there is a steady stream of haunting experiences that folks have had while they're traveling down this road. Not just eerie feelings or their hair standing up on end. There's some really crazy shit happening on this little country road. But of course, the best of it all occurs at the cemetery. One of the eeriest statements I read was by a woman made in 2010. Okay, so this chick and her husband and some of their friends go to visit the cemetery, and while they're there, they see this man wandering aimlessly through the headstones, but none of them paid him, much attention. A few days later, at her own home, this chick goes to get a shower. When she turns to close the curtain, the creepy-ass dude is standing there in her bedroom, staring straight at her. After he, or it, succeeds in scaring the hell out of her, it disappears into thin air and it never came back. So from what I hear, she actually got off easy because locals warn folks when they head down that road, it's not unusual for something to come back with them. Then there's this one guy in his story. Wait till you hear this madness. Okay, so this guy and his friend go to the cemetery one afternoon, and as they're walking around, the one guy sees a hand protruding from a grave. Eager to check it out, he drags his unwilling friend over to the grave with him. By the time they're close enough, the entire arm has dug its way from the dirt. So what does the one guy do? Get this. Despite the other guy begging him to back away, the one guy kneels down and goes to touch the hand. What a freaking idiot. I mean, really. I might have handed the hand a beer or something, but I damn sure ain't going to touch it. So anyway, the hand grabs the one guy tight and he starts pulling at him, trying to pull him down into the grave. So his poor terrified friend grabs a hold of him and starts pulling his friend backwards. Eventually the ass clown is freed. So he stands up to ask his freaked out friend if he's okay, and when he does, he sees a man standing directly behind his friend. So he lunges forward to protect his friend just as the other man lifts his head. The other dude looked exactly like his friend who had been begging his dumb ass to leave the entire time. So when he turns away from this other dude, his friend is gone. He's like nowhere. So Ass Clown starts freaking out, and he starts running, and when he gets to the car, he notices these huge handprints all in the dust on the car. So now he's all freaked out, but he heads to safety anyway, and he jumps in, and he locks the doors, and while he's sitting there trying to make sense of what the hell had just happened, he gets this feeling he needs to look in the back seat. So he does, and guess what he sees? It's his friend, crumpled up in the back seat, deader than hell. So, back to those huge handprints. It seems that's a typical occurrence there. There are hundreds of reports where vehicle owners have stated that there's handprints all over their cars when they leave through there, and that's without even having stopped on the road or at the cemetery. The handprints aren't the only things that actually occur on the roadway. There are tons of reports of folks having seen these unexplainable red lights. The number of the lights seen always coincides with the number of the people in the vehicle. There's this one report made by 4 individuals that took a ride down Demon Road one evening. So they're riding along, and all of a sudden 4 red lights appear from out of nowhere. Mesmerized by these floating anomalies, the driver takes his foot off the gas and slows down. Moments later, it sounded like something hits the back of the car. The passengers in the back seat turn around, and they immediately see 4 huge handprints appear on the surface of the trunk. And I'm betting at that point that's when the driver floored it and got the hell out of there. So besides these mystery lights and massive handprints, plenty of other ghostly apparitions are seen on the roadway to Martha's Chapel Cemetery. 2 of the most commonly seen are a young child with glowing eyes that's riding a tricycle along the roadway, and a second faceless figure that brings with it an overwhelming sensation of threat to those that see it. These spirits choose to reveal themselves in many different forms, but regardless to how they are witnessed, they are never reported as anything less than terrifying and violent. Oh, violent! That reminds me of something else I wanted to tell you guys about. So, everybody knows about the Lizzie Borden story, right? Well, as y'all already know, I like to tell you guys the less commercialized haunted tales, but this kind of fits right in place. So, assuming you know the story of how Lizzie supposedly murdered her parents by hacking them up with an axe, I'm going to drop a little knowledge on you about Lizzie. Here's 10 facts that I bet you didn't know. Okay, so first off, Abby Borden was not Lizzie's mother. She was her stepmother. Maybe even a little bit more reason to motivate her to slaughtering her after knowing that. But Lizzie always suspected Abby of being after her father's money. And in fact, weeks before the murders, her father, Andrew Borden, had given several pieces of real estate over to members of Abby's family. Next fact. Andrew Borden was not a well-liked man. He was a tightwad in business and at home. Neither level of his 2-story home had indoor plumbing. He was just as frugal in his business dealings as he was at home, and that made him a ton of enemies in the community. Okay, next fact. The jump rope rhyme got it wrong. There wasn't 40 whacks on both bodies combined. Abby got 19 whacks and Andrew got 10, maybe 11, which were, by the way, made by an axe-like tool, not an axe as the legend would have it. Next fact. The Borden's maid was in the house while the murders took place. She was never called in and questioned, but she did testify against Lizzie at her trial. And next fact, Lizzie had tried and failed to buy poison the day before the murders. The local drugstore refused to supply her with prussic acid, aka hydrogen cyanide, because she didn't have a prescription. Next, there was no blood splatter on Lizzie when the police arrived at the home. This would have been impossible for her to have cleaned up in time in between the murders and when the authorities arrived on scene. So she would have had to have taken off her bloody clothes and hidden them, which none were ever found. She would have had to hid the murder weapon, which also was never found. She would have to go outside to bathe and wash her hair, then dry her hair with no blow dryer and get dressed again. So one day she's trying to buy cyanide, and the next there's absolutely no possible way she could have committed the murders. Okay, and the next fact. There was never any physical evidence found to incriminate Lizzie. Fingerprinting was a new technology at this time, but it surely could have been used at the murder scene. And next rumor. has it that Lizzie was a recluse. Couldn't be any further from the truth. Lizzie had a very active social life and was very well known and liked throughout the community. Okay, and the trial. The trial went on for 5 days, yet Lizzie was acquitted after the jury deliberated only for an hour and a half. And lastly, even though Lizzie was acquitted of the murders, she never was socially accepted again. She and her other sister moved into a larger house in the same area. Lizzie was basically ostracized from the community at large, and to make matters even worse, her name was in the headlines of local papers again in 1897 after she got busted shoplifting in Rhode Island. So now that we know all about Lizzie, I'd say she paid somebody to do it, right? And that's just my opinion. Okay, so we're rolling up on a commercial break. It's time to go refill those drinks, make your pee run, and meet me back right here so I can introduce you to my guest tonight, Charles Theroux from SNS Broadcasting. Hurry back, and I'll be waiting for you right here on Armed Radio and TuneIn Satellite.
Route 106 Motors is the home of fine pre-owned vehicles. Experience a no-pressure sale with a family-friendly atmosphere. Route 106 Motors has been practicing the same simple philosophy of low prices for over a decade, and it has brought us great success. Recently, while other dealers are closing their doors, Route 106 Motors is expanding. We are a wholesale dealer, and we own the property and pay cash for all the vehicles. This allows us to sell to the consumer for a lot less than the average dealership. We are a high-volume, small-profit dealer, and we pass the savings on to you. New changes have been made at Route 106 Motors. Stop by and check out our brand new building. Route 106 Motors, located at 569 West Street. Check our website at route106motors.com and be sure to like us on Facebook to find out about all the latest deals and savings opportunities. route106motors.com.
And now, another fresh insight from Roger Berkowitz, President and CEO of Legal Seafoods.
If your wife can't take the time to test your tuna for purity, then why should you take the time to come to a complete stop before letting her out of the car? Just saying.
Legal Seafoods. If it isn't fresh, it isn't legal.
Are you hangry? Know the signs. Uncontrollable yelling.
Why aren't you egg rolls?
Hallucination.
Sushi.
Pants discomfort.
I hate you, pants.
Hangry. It can happen to anyone. Fortunately, there's E24, the app that tells hunger to shut up.
Egg rolls. Thanks, Snoop.
E24. In my medical opinion, it's the best way to order food online, baby.
Hey, Dan. How's the day going so far?
My day? Couldn't be better. You pull up less than 3 minutes after I open my Lyft app, and how do you greet me? With a kind hello? Just delightful.
Great. Care for a cookie?
A cookie? A chocolate chip cookie? You know, I'd love one.
Sure.
Hey, let me ask you something. How did you know I love this song?
I mean, come on, it's the Cold War, kids. Everybody loves them.
Whoa! Who taught this guy how to merge? That was a fantastic merge!
Couldn't agree more.
That's it? That's all this costs? What's this thing running on? Smiles and high fives? You son of Mike, I love you!
Thanks. Have a great day.
Lyft. Driving you happy. Just download and go.
Hey, Joe Rocks, it's Louis Avis, straight from Chi-Town. Call and talk about our website, www.hotsaucevault.com. We got everything you can think of out there, Joe. The hottest hot sauces, not for wimps, mild, medium sauces. We got barbecue sauces, snacks, some of our gift ideas and gag gifts, so you can go out and check us out at www.hotsaucevault.com. Hope to talk to you again on your radio show. Kick-ass show. Had a great time last week. Hope to hear from you soon. Take care, Joe. hotsaucevault.com.
Well, it's about damn time. We've been waiting for y'all. But we're glad you found your way back, because I have Charles with me right here, right now. Well, not right here, right now, but in spirit right here, right now. Right, Charles?
I'm here. I'm here in spirit.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you here tonight. But first things first, you got to pay your penance and tell me something creepy.
Tell you something creepy.
Yeah, you know me. I like creepy and scary. What you got?
Yeah. Nothing but a bunch of political stories. Those are pretty creepy, right?
Oh, yeah, they are. I try to stay away from that because I offend too many people.
Yeah. All politics now is bananas. Creepy. Well, you put me on the spot. Actually, you know, I was thinking of one of the first things that kind of gave me nightmares, made me really scared as a kid, was, you know, I had an older brother and sister. They used to love to find a scary movie on HBO or something, and kind of halfway through My Bloody Birthday, they would sneak out of the room and leave me there by myself. And for a while, once I realized I was there by myself, I would just get petrified. And I remember one of the scariest things that scared me the most was when I watched that television show, Beauty and the Beast. For that, with Linda Hamilton. It was a great show. I loved it. I thought it was wonderful, and it really wasn't scary. But for some reason, in the middle of the night, I wake up and I go to get like a drink of water out of the kitchen, and we had this big long dining room, and I swear to you, Lynn, Vincent from Beauty and the Beast was hiding behind my curtain, just staring at me.
Dude, I'd have a blast with you.
I mean,
you'd never sleep again if you were around me.
I'm telling you, I was just petrified. I don't know what it was, but it got into my brain, and I was terrified. I remember sitting there staring at that dark dining room for, it must have been 3 or 4 minutes, but it felt like forever.
That's hilarious, man.
So
I'll let you slide with that, being that you're apparently traumatized.
It was horrible.
Fantastic. All right, dude, your penance is paid. I'll take that. Okay. Awesome. For those of you that don't know, I actually got to meet Charles for an interview with SNS just a few days before the last massive flood hit Louisiana. And Charles was cool enough to follow up with me and check on things and kind of keep an eye on me. So that'll tell you guys exactly what kind of a cool guy he is. And I'm looking forward to hearing about what Charles has going on right now, because he's a very busy little dude. So what's happening in your world, Charles?
Well, thank you. That was a crazy time, because it was directly, I think that was the day it started raining.
Yeah, it was.
If I remember. Yeah, so... maybe we're just not a good combo.
I don't know.
You've been hitting me up with the texts and the phone calls, but given our past history, it's just not meant to be.
Well, if it floods again over the weekend coming, then we'll know for sure, right?
Yeah, we'll know if it's like the Witches of Eastwick, right? You just that. Lately, the podcast has been going not as much as I'd like it to, but I'm kind of like you with the full-time job on top of everything else, you know,
right?
The family and the Rugrat. But got a couple of episodes in the pipe work. One with a gentleman who has an opposing political view than I do, but we're both friends. So that should be an interesting one.
That's what I was fixing to say. That sounds like it could be very interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff going on today is too personal and not global enough. So that'll be one coming up. And then is always looking for good Baton Rouge comedians. You know, I love comedians. They have a great take on things, a great way of touching aspects of your life, you know, just the mundane, and putting a humor twist to it that, you know, makes you say, wow, I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
you discovered some new talent out in that direction?
There's actually a budding comedy scene in Baton Rouge. It's pretty interesting. There are people, there are open mics around the city, little comedy clubs, and a lot of people doing other podcasts and skit shows. Like it's a whole thing here, which I didn't know about. And the more you get into it, the more you see how everybody knows everybody, and it's a tight-knit community. It's really interesting.
That's pretty cool. No, I was not aware of that. I like humor too. I have my moments.
Sure, sure.
It doesn't all have to be blood and guts, but it just kind of ends that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. A lot does, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially these days. You have actually had some really big-name folks on your show interviewing them. You had just left a very famous gentleman when you came and interviewed me. I was like your dud of the day after that, right?
No, you definitely weren't the dud of the day. But yeah, I got to interview John Schneider. A lot of people know him from Smallville and The Haves and Have-Nots, and of course, being Bo Duke on the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yes, indeed. Nobody could fill out them jeans like Bo Duke.
I know, right? He's and he's kind of looks like what you'd expect, just a big, tall, lean guy, really nice, really energetic, and growing up in a certain era when those TV shows were big, Dukes of Hazzard, it was really cool to be able to sit down and talk to a guy, see what kind of misperceptions you really have on what kind of person this guy is.
Right.
It's pretty interesting.
So what is he up to these days? I know, but some of the listeners might not know, so fill them in.
Yeah. John Schneider has John Schneider Studios based in southern Louisiana, where he films his own movies, writes his own movies, finds local Louisiana talent, and makes his own brand of movies here in the state and promotes the state with music concerts and doing a lot of flood relief right now.
Really?
Yeah, so he's just a guy that likes to work. I mean, you never see him sitting still. He's always doing something. The fame is... he told me an interesting thing during the interview. He said, being Bo Duke doesn't do anything for me today. It did in the 1980s.
Right.
But he's kind of an onward type of guy. Let's do something new. Let's do something else. That's done. Let's keep going forward.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool to actually have a face-to-face conversation with somebody like that and see that they're a real person.
Yeah, for sure. And he, like you can relate all that what he had there, that little infrastructure was underwater.
Yeah.
Same as what you and your husband had to deal with, all just kind of proof, and so many people still are dealing with it.
Yeah. And that's amazing to me. I guess people have told me you're lucky. Well, no, we're not lucky. We've just got it down pat because we've been through it enough. 90 days. It takes 90 days to recover, whether it's 3 feet or 8 feet.
Sure.
In 90 days.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, the guests I've had, you included. I mean, they're all things that I'm interested in, but not by any means an expert on any of it. But. Hopefully I'm smart enough to kind of understand what some of these people are telling me, and it makes for an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. With you having your pulse on the comedian scene in the Baton Rouge area, I'd like to hook you up with, and I'm going to do so later this evening. Alan Lloyd is a friend of mine that I had on a few weeks ago, and there was a place here in Hammond called the Indie where they would do open mic for comedians, artists, poets, musicians, anybody, in the artist community. So, you might be able to do some networking there. Definitely talk to him, have him on, because he's got an interesting background in films as well. I think you guys probably have met or know some of the same people.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Alan Lloyd. I mean, I'm all about, kind of finding something out there that's interesting and sparks people's interest, and especially the comedy scene. I've found that's a real tight-knit group here in Baton Rouge. It's kind of like just a subculture you didn't know existed.
Right, and the time is good for it because we need some comedy in our lives. Everybody's really focused on everything that's going on in politics. I try not to look at it because it tends to piss me off one way or the other. So,
sure.
You have to stay away from it. But then again, you have to also keep your finger on that pulse as well to know if if the world's fixing to blow up, you kind of want to be a little prepared. There's some prayers and things you might want to say first, right?
Yeah. You know, if you need to grab a bunch of canned foods quick and head to the mountains, you got to pay attention. You know, otherwise it'll be too late. But I don't think we're at that point yet. It's not
no,
a Walking Dead scenario. But comedy. You know, when you could see something that you may disagree with in a funny light, you know, and maybe through the eyes of somebody else, you know, it just helps people come together, helps at least understand where you're coming from without things getting so personal.
Right. Well, that's a good thing to be involved in.
I wanted to tell you, I was listening to your Lizzie Borden, The Facts.
Yeah.
And just so happened, about 2 weeks ago, I listened to this really long podcast, and it was all about Lizzie Borden. Every fact that you said, I knew from this podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Somebody else does their homework. That's awesome.
Yeah, Lizzie Borden was really interesting, and I was also checking out the Allen Haunted House.
Yeah.
The Allen House. The images of that thing are just crazy. It just looks like a movie horror house.
It does. It'll search for the videos, and you'll see the one I was talking about. It's insane.
Yeah. There are certain places, whether you knew something happened there or not, I don't think I'd really go there. I'd just leave well enough alone.
Of course, you're scared of Vincent.
Yeah. The beauty of the beast guy might be.
Yeah, I can't see you going into the Allen house, not at all.
Would you do that, Lynn? Would you follow creepy footsteps around the house?
Yeah, I probably would, but I'm a little different than everybody else.
Oh, my goodness.
Probably so. I'd be there with my cell phone taking pictures every step. There's actually some other background on the Lizzie Borden house itself, but I haven't been able to find enough collaborating sources to do a story on it. But there supposedly was someone that lived there before. It was a woman, and she kind of lost her mind and drowned her 2 toddler children in a well on that same property. Like I said, I found it in one place, and when I don't find it in at least 3 places where I can join the story together, I don't broadcast it. So we'll see. Maybe it'll turn up. Anything on that podcast about that?
About a previous owner, not that I recall, but they did go into the sordid history of Lizzie, her sister, and her stepmother, and then there was the housekeeper, and they go into the history about it, and maybe they go into this like kind of crazy implied love triangle. Because of Lizzie and her sister were old maids, never been married, never really courted, and the community, from the information that I was getting, is like the community just said, okay, these are 2 lesbian ladies. Back then,
that wasn't acceptable.
No, that was not a cool thing.
Right.
They were kind of ostracized.
Yeah, I don't know. There was definitely something weird going on beneath the scenes there, and we probably will never know.
Sure. Yeah. But acquitted. I think a lot of people back then, in the 18 or 1920s, somebody wants to sentence a woman to death.
That's exactly right. I was waiting for you to say that, and you're right. That they're not going to do it. Not in those times.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. Well, so tell me what is coming up next with you? When is your next broadcast? Who's your next guest coming up? Any plans in the near future?
Next guest, still working on it. Waiting on. There's a comedian that I've been chasing, Evan Rabelais. He's a Baton Rouge comedian, really funny guy. Around that whole culture, does things with the Manship Theater and open mics in Baton Rouge. He's a guest, and then my buddy, a friend of mine, Chuck Smith. He's out in Mandeville area. I think he's about to open up a gun store. Mm-hmm. And he's the guy that I was talking to about just getting a different political conversation going with somebody that I like, has been a friend for a long time. But when it comes to that one area, we're kind of on opposite sides of the fence.
That one I think I'll actually listen to. I want to hear that one.
But it doesn't, it doesn't affect anything else.
Right.
And that's, I had to get up and go to work today no matter who's president.
That's exactly right. That's the right attitude to have. Well, that's cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on tonight. I've enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for all your support in the past, too, definitely. And looking forward to maybe having you come back on in the future, and I'll tell a scary Sleeping Beauty story instead of Beauty and the Beast. How about that?
I love it. Thank you very much, Lynn. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Charles. You have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, kiddos, we got just a little bit more time together tonight, and I think that we can fit just one more story in. So, how about the horrors of Fox Hollow? So let me start with a little background first so we can better understand how this joint came to be as haunted as it is today. And in order to do that, I'll have to tell you about the twisted bastard that made it that way. All right. Herb Baumeister was basically a normal kid until he hit puberty. Then he starts acting like a freaking crazy person. He had some weird infatuation with dead things. No, that's not me. But the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back is when he pissed on his teacher's desk at school. So guess what? Herb is diagnosed with schizophrenia and was found to have multiple personalities. Think his parents had him treated? No, of course not. Thank you so much for that. So later on, he does a year of college, and he actually meets up with his soon-to-be missus. He and Juliana Sater were married in 1971, but on the honeymoon, it was actually over 6 months later when Herb found himself committed into a crazy house for a couple months. Think it helped? No. Not so much. But apparently, he was able to keep his crazy tucked in for a few years, and he and his wife started their own family. There were 3 kids, 2 daughters, and a son. Herb had managed to hold down a job with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. We already know what kind of crazy folks work there, right? So anyway, he did well, and he managed to work his way up to the position of program director. He was, everything was great, and Herb felt he had to screw it up and piss on something again. So this time he pisses on a letter that was intended for the governor. Yeah, so they fired Herb's ass real quick, fast, and in a hurry. This is right about the time when Herb's crazy got out. In 1985, Herb committed a hit and run while intoxicated, but didn't really get in any trouble other than a brisk slap on the wrist. Then in March of 1986, Herb gets busted for auto theft and conspiracy to commit theft. Again, he gets a minor slap on the wrist. In 1988, Herb borrows $4,000 from his mother and starts a business venture, a line of thrift stores called Save-A-Lot. By 1991, his businesses had become so successful that he was able to purchase Fox Hollow for his family. So this place is a very high-end home, complete with an indoor pool and pool house on 18 acres. So quite a step up from where they had been, right? The home was lavishly decorated and even had mannequins staged all over the place, dressed as if they were attending some upscale pool party. And I'm assuming that the wife thought this shit was okay? Right. So, just after the purchase of Fox Hollow, Herb starts hanging out at gay bars while he's posing as an autoerotic asphyxiation fetishist. Why? He was stalking victims that he would bring back to his pool house and murder. Herb would get these poor unsuspecting men obliterated, then bring them home with him, get them in the pool, and strangle them. He'd then hack up the bodies and discard the pieces parts in the woods behind his house. So this apparently goes on for a while. Reports of missing men began piling up, all along with unidentified bodies that were being discovered between Indiana and Ohio. Wait, I thought you said he killed them in the pool house, yeah? Yeah, just hold on, I'm getting to that. So, investigators are pulling their hair out. None of these missing people or unidentified bodies seem to be linked. But finally, in 1992, they caught a lucky break in the form of a tip. Tony Harris filed a report that said a Brian Smart had killed his friend and had tried to kill him as well. Well, it wasn't much of a lucky break because they couldn't find anyone named Brian Smart. Well, by 1994, things had begun to go south with old Herb. His businesses had begun to fail, and it may have had something to do with him showing up to work drunk and pissing off his staff. Yes, I said pissing off, not pissing on this time. During this time, he also caught another DWI, which got him 3 days in the can and a year's probation. To make matters worse, his son, 13 at the time, discovers a human skull in the woods behind their house. When questioned by his wife, he lies, and he said it was from an old medical skeleton that his deceased father had once owned. Later on, when his wife went looking around for the rest of the skeleton, nothing was found, so she assumed that the remains had been dragged off by some wild animal and accepted Herb's explanation. All seemed to be okay until 1995, when Tony Harris has another run-in with Brian Smart at a local gay bar. This time he gets the license plate number. Oh yeah, it's on now. So the police show up at Fox Hollow and ask to search the house and grounds. Both Herb and his wife refuse. Herb lies again and tells his wife that somebody was trying to frame him for theft. Again, she buys his story. By 1996, Herb has let his crazy out, and between his fits of suicidal depression and violent mood swings, the wife has finally had enough, and she files for divorce. During this time, Herb's out of town on vacation, and the police approach the wife again about searching the property. This time, she agrees. So, during the first search, police discovered 5,500 bones, bone fragments, and teeth from at least 4 victims. A second search prompts Herb's neighbor to start looking around, and guess what? He finds more pieces, parts. So the police come back for a second search. This time they discover another 140 bones, including rib cages and spinal columns, buried in the muck beneath a large drain pipe, and surrounding the remains were piles of Miller Genuine Draft Can, Herb's favorite drink. Well, don't that just say it all? Miller beer. Really? That explains his fascination with piss, right? So, all in all, pieces from 11 bodies were recovered on the grounds. Now we're getting back to the bodies that keep popping up in between Indiana and Ohio. 9 in all. Herb's wife tells the police that he made hundreds of trips back and forth on that same highway. He told her they were all business related. So Herb, in the meanwhile, calls his brother and tells him that he's on a business trip and he needs some funds sent to him immediately. His brother, unaware of the grisly excavations going on at Fox Hollow, agrees and wires him some cash. So a few days later, Herb calls his brother again for more cash. But this time, the brother knows what Herb's been up to, and he tells him that the police want to have a little chat with him about all the bodies they're digging up over at his house. So, out of options, Herb flees to Canada. A few days later, he writes a suicide note blaming his death on a failed business and marriage, but makes no mention of all the murders that he's committed. Once he finishes the note, he blows his brains out. Okay, so I told you all that to tell you this. In 2009, Rob and Vicki Graves purchased the Fox Hollow farm at a very good price. They inquired about the history of the property, and when told by the realtor what had happened there, they discussed it, and they decided they'd be okay with staying there. Okay, whatever. So anyway, everything seemed to be okay for the first little while. Then one day, Vicky's vacuuming up gravel tracked in by the kids, and the cord for the vacuum cleaner gets unplugged from the wall for no reason. She plugs the vacuum cleaner back in and returns to finish cleaning up the gravel. It comes unplugged a second time, and then a third time. Guess she went and got a broom after that, right? So, a short while after that, Vicky spots a man in a red t-shirt wandering around by the tree line on their property. As she's watching him walk away, she realizes that he has no legs, and then all of a sudden he disappears. So Vicky and Rob go out into the woods to see if they can find this trespasser. No luck, though. Well, a few days later, Joe LeBlanc, a friend that they had rented an apartment on the property to, sees the same guy in a red t-shirt while he's out walking his dog. He runs after him and he catches up. He was face to face with the intruder when he suddenly disappeared in thin air. A few days later, Joe's out walking his dog again. The dog breaks free and runs into the same spot where Joe had chased the guy in the red t-shirt. This time he lays down on the ground in front of him, and there is a human femur sitting there. The police were called, and of course more bones were discovered, but curiously after that, the guy in the red t-shirt never reappears. But the amount of paranormal activity on the property only got worse. Joe seemed to be catching the brunt of it. There was a constant aggressive knocking on his door, and every time he opened it, there was no one there. One night in particular, the knocking came. Joe opens the door, and of course, there's no one there, but the metal knocker was standing straight up, just as if somebody was holding it in their hand about to knock. Joe slams the door and bolts it shut. Then the doorknob starts twisting like somebody's trying to come in. After a few minutes, the door busts off its hinges, sending shards of wood throughout the apartment. So Joe is scared and he's pissed, and he charges out of the doorway to confront whoever had destroyed his door, and he comes face to face with a young man that's soaking wet. The man is frantic, and he runs into Joe's apartment, and he's screaming for his life as he's running about. Then all of a sudden he vanishes into thin air. Joe later identified the man as one of Herb's victims. Bizarre and terrifying events just became a part of Joe's life. There was always the feeling of being watched, and bodiless footsteps and constant knocking. One night Joe had had enough as he was alerted to a metallic scratching sound that was coming from the kitchen. So he walks in and he finds this knife laying on the kitchen counter, and there are long deep cuts in the walls and the cabinet fronts. Fox Hollow Farm is a hot spot for paranormal activity. There have been countless investigations, each one yielding a plethora of shadowy figures, terrified voices, and an angry entity that's assumed to be Herb. Sometimes these investigations even turn up more bones. No one will ever know for sure just how many bodies could possibly still be on the grounds at Fox Hollow, not to mention still to be recovered corpses dumped on the side of backcountry roads by Herb on his trips between Ohio and Indiana. So, stay out of those gay bars, kiddos. You might run into the next Brian Smart. Don't let yourself become a notch on another sick-ass serial killer's belt, right? So, hope you guys enjoyed the show. In the meanwhile, if you need to get your scary on in between now and then, I've got all the horror you can handle at authorlyngibson.com, where you'll find my books along with links to my blog, and a Spreaker where you can replay all past episodes of the show. So until next time, guys, you kiddos keep it creepy, because you know I will.